Hi Year 6, Mrs Bradshaw here. I hope you're having a brilliant day on your second WWW takeover time at Manor School. I might be able to pop in at some point today, so if you see me lurking through the window at the door, then give me a wave. But because I can't be there in person with all of you at the same time, I'm recording my session like this. So for the next hour or so, we're going to have a little bit of time to think about the challenges that you might be about to face as you go through this transition from primary to secondary. And we're going to think a little bit about how we can build our resilience. But before we do anything else, let's start with a game. So all of you this year have done your sessions with me. I don't know if you're sitting with the people from your school or if you've all been mixed up. Hopefully by now you're starting to make friends with each other and you're sharing ideas. You may even have just done the Taskmaster challenges, so you've had to really work as a team there. So my first challenge is, can you remember the 4 parts of the brain that we learnt about in our Pause B lessons? Get a mark for each part of the brain that you can remember. You get an extra mark if you spell them correctly. Bonus point if you can remember the action that went with each one. And extra points if you can remember what that part of the brain does. So I think that adds up to 5 points. Have a go with your team, whoever you're sitting with. Piece of paper in front of you, can scribble down ideas, write down the names of those parts of the brain. What was the action that went with it? What does that part of the brain do? And spell it correctly. Okay, that's 4. Mrs Bradshaw can't count. It's hot. 4 points up for grabs for those 4 parts of the brain. I'm going to give you a clue. So pause the video here. Have about 2 minutes to come up with those 4 parts of the brain. Feedback to one another. See how you get on. So hopefully you've worked together and you've remembered all 4 of them. Let's just run through them now. So the first one, I mean, it doesn't matter which order you did them in, but hopefully you got these 4. So we've got the prefrontal cortex, also known as the PFC, but hopefully you have spelt prefrontal cortex correctly. And this is our team leader, remember, it's where our thinking happens, where we make choices, it's where we communicate from. All our learning happens here, and it's also where we focus and concentrate. And this was the clue, wasn't it? This is our action for it. So write down how many points you got for remembering prefrontal cortex, if you spelt it correctly, what it does, and what the action was. Next up was the hippocampus. This was the action because of the shape of it, if you remember. I could have given you a bonus point for remembering that hippocampus is the Latin word for seahorse, which is where it gets its name from, the shape. It's curled around like a seahorse. And this is where our memories are stored. When we learn something, it's stored there. And it's the part of the brain that links our past experiences with the present. And we're going to talk about the hippocampus in a minute. Then the amygdala, my favourite part of the brain. It's the body's early alarm system, isn't it? It's there to keep us safe. It's our fight, flight and freeze response or reaction. And remember, it doesn't think, it just reacts, which is why we sometimes get into a bit of bother when our amygdala is firing. And lastly, we've got the insula. So it recognises, it manages and it regulates our emotions. It's also the part of the brain that recognises how other people are feeling. Something that's going to be very important as you grow up and you move on to secondary school, as we develop new relationships and we begin to go through puberty and things like that. Our emotions can kind of take over, can't they? So understanding how we feel our emotions, understanding our amygdala, and being able to make good choices and focus and concentrate, all of these things are going to be so crucial as we move on to the next stage of our learning journey. So, as we start on our journey towards starting secondary school, we're going to meet lots of new challenges. And at a time when we're going through a lot of change, we can feel that our resilience sometimes drops. Remember, resilience means our ability to kind of come back from difficulties, to bounce back when we face a setback. So we're going to do a little bit of work thinking about what have we learned in the past that's going to help us to meet these new challenges as we start at secondary school. So the first thing that I would like you to do is, as a group all together or in smaller groups and then feedback as a main class, I want you to brainstorm all the things that you feel like are going to be a challenge as you start secondary school. Now, there may be some things that you thought were going to be a challenge, and actually after you've done your transition days at secondary, you're thinking, okay, that's not such a big deal now. Write those things down as well, because we can learn from them. So think about all the things maybe you're worried about or you're unsure of. There's things that you're not quite sure how that's going to be, things that you think you might find difficult, maybe moving around from lesson to lesson, maybe having to make new friends, or maybe working with lots of different teachers when you're used to just having one. Brainstorm them all together as a class, and then on the next slide we're going to think about, well, what skills and tools have we got that are going to help us as we meet these new challenges. So hopefully your board at the front of the room, or maybe even the piece of paper you've got in front of you, is now covered with things that as a group, collectively, you've thought about might be a challenge. And it might be some of the things that I've already mentioned: moving from room to room, making new friends, getting to know lots of different teachers. Maybe you put down things like having to remember all your equipment, what happens if you forget something, what happens if I get a behaviour point, what will happen if I get a detention. These all might be things that you're kind of worried about, preoccupied about, and we know that when our body notices that we're feeling an emotion, that sometimes that can trigger our amygdala, and it can make us go into flight or freeze mode when we're feeling a bit worried or a bit nervous. It can make us kind of want to shut down. So what I want us to think about is some times where we've perhaps felt in a similar way in the past, and I want you to remember, what did you do that helped you overcome those challenges? So maybe you've started a new school before. Think about how you felt then and how you felt once you'd started the school. When did all the worries disappear? Was it when you started making new friends? Was it when the school began to feel a bit more familiar? Was there something else that helped, people being friendly or something like that? So I want us to use our hippocampus now. We're going to go back to times when there were things that we thought we couldn't do that we have then managed to overcome. So have a chat with your friends now on your table and think about those times when you've done something new for the first time, where maybe you were feeling a bit like you're feeling now. Maybe it was starting a new club outside of school. Maybe it was going to swimming lessons, or maybe it was moving house, starting a new school. Maybe it was being given a bit more responsibility at home and you didn't think you were going to be able to do it. Talk about some times when you had some change in your life, and then think about, what was it that helped you to overcome it? How did you get to a point where you no longer felt so nervous about doing those things? Have a chat as a class, and then we'll come back together. So hopefully you've had a really great discussion on things that you once thought you couldn't do that now you've overcome and you've been able to do them. I'm going to show you an example now that this might apply to lots of you, and it's learning to ride a bike. So none of us are born just knowing how to ride a bike. And even before the steps that I'm going to take you through, we've done things like we've learned to stand, we've learned to balance on 2 feet, we've learned to walk. All of those things have to come before we can even think about learning how to ride a bike. But I've broken down what we've done to overcome riding a bike into different steps, as you can see here. So down at the bottom, I put the first thing that we have to do when we're learning to ride a bike is we have to learn to balance, don't we? That we sit on the seat, we hold the handlebars, and we balance on those 2 wheels. Now, sometimes we have help with things like stabilizers, or we have somebody holding onto the back of the bike for us. So we start step by step. Even that step, learning to balance, we break down into smaller steps, maybe with stabilizers, starting with 2, maybe then onto 1, then onto none, but somebody holding on. We have to learn how to pedal. So when we first get a bike, maybe it's a balance bike with no pedals at all, and we learn just to move by using our feet to push us along, and we balance. Then when we get a bike and we've got stabilizers on, we learn to pedal with the stabilizers helping us to stay up. We take the stabilizers off, and we have to suddenly put all these skills together, don't we? And it can be tricky, and we wobble, and we may even fall off. Then we have to learn how to balance without somebody holding on to us. So there's that moment where we have to do it on our own. And we have to learn all the skills of how do I balance it while trying to do everything else, like learning to pedal without someone holding on. So we have to bring all the skills together. And this bit takes a lot of practice. We stop, start, we put our feet down, we wobble from side to side. Sometimes we even fall off. We have to keep going, we have to keep trying. Till eventually we learn to pedal quick enough that we keep going on our own and we're able to pull all those together. And my goodness, don't we feel great when we've done that. So some of the values or the skills that we use as we're learning things like this, I've put down here. And you might recognise some of them as some of the values that you have in your school. Things like resilience. It's easy to just give up the first time you fall off, not get back on, not keep trying. But if we did that, we don't ever get anywhere, we don't learn. Perseverance, again, that ability to keep trying even when something's difficult, even when things aren't going well. We might start to notice that frustration appears and we're really getting ourselves tied up in knots because we can't do something we want to do. But that's where determination comes in, because we have to decide that we're going to keep trying until we get it. We have to have courage, we have to be brave. Doing something for the first time without somebody holding on, without someone holding our hand, going out on our own is scary, but we have the courage to do it, and we're ambitious. We want to achieve, we want to keep getting better. And when we do achieve it, then we have pride in what we have achieved. So on your sheets now, I want you to draw your own little stepping stones, and I want you to think about something that you have learned how to do and break it down into the steps of how you managed to do it. You could use the riding a bike one, like I've used. Use some of my ideas, maybe put a bit more information in there. You could think about something like a difficult level that you've done on your computer game. How did you break it down into steps? What skills did you have to use? You could do something like a skill in a hobby that you have. Maybe you're a football player and there was some skill that you couldn't do and you've really practiced and practiced in order to break it down and to get there. Could be something else. It could be something at school that you've tried and tried again to do and you finally got there. It could be a skill like tying your shoelaces. You could pick anything you want and break it down into those little steps to think about how did you overcome that challenge? What did you have to do? And down the side, think about those values and those skills, those qualities that you had to possess in order to be able to achieve it. And maybe it's something that you're not there yet with, something that you're still trying to master. That's okay. That would be really great to think about. What are the steps that you're taking? Really break it down and think about, look back. This is where our hippocampus comes in. What have you learned in the past that's helping you now? What could you not have done today because you've done all the things before that come first? So now let's bring it back to our transition and moving on to the next step of our secondary school life. I want you to take one of those things that you think might be a challenge for you, one thing that you're worried about or a little bit concerned about, and I want you to break down everything that you've learned before that's going to help you to tackle that. So if you're worried about finding a way around school, what have you learnt already that's going to help you with that? Maybe you've learnt how to ask for help when you need it. Maybe you've learnt that you're not alone and that everybody will be feeling the same. Maybe you've learnt a breathing practice like a pause B that will help you when you start to feel a bit wobbly, a bit stressed. Maybe you've learnt the names of some teachers at Manor already that you know you'll be able to ask for help for. So break it down into the steps of what is it that's actually going to help you to overcome these challenges that you might face.